the whole bill. It's unfortunate, and what really disappoints me is you really don't see the viability of that life and the mother's life. I know you think you do, but you are not. And of course, that's my thought process, but it really saddens me that Minnesotans are now going to have something they had not intended on. And I think you're going to find that in your constituents. I'd suggest you go back and talk to them and let them know what a partial birth abortion is and how awful this is. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion on the Keel Amendment as amended by the Hollins Amendment? Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I would ask you to vote no.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Neu Brindley moves to amend House File Number 1. The amendment is coded A22-2.
The member from Chisago, Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A22 amendment, as Representative Katiza-Watun indicated earlier, some of these amendments have been offered before, but we think the full body should have an opportunity to vote on these amendments and not just those few members who were in committee. Frankly, right now, the underlying bill language allows for abortion for any reason, via any method, at any point in pregnancy. It is the most extreme position on abortion in the entire world, literally on the world stage with just 7 other countries. So the A22 amendment seeks to put some guardrails around that. And what it would do, it says that for a 3rd trimester abortion, it would only be allowable in cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And the reason we do this, there's some question among medical experts about when a baby can feel pain in the womb. Somewhere between 8 and 20 weeks, we don't know exactly when that might be. But certainly by the 3rd trimester, we do know that babies in utero can feel excruciating pain in the 3rd trimester. And the 3 most common procedures used in a 3rd trimester abortion, and I apologize ahead of time, are pretty heinous. One method of aborting a baby in the 3rd trimester, one of the 3 most common methods, is that of dismemberment. And that is exactly what it sounds like. A baby is literally torn inside the womb. And typically, it's pretty gruesome, it's pretty graphic. Tools are inserted into the uterus. They grab what they can grab, and they pull. And whatever comes out, comes out. After that's done, that baby has to be reassembled to ensure that they got every piece out, one by one. So dismemberment of a human being who can feel pain in the 3rd trimester. Another most common method, one of the 3 most common methods of aborting a baby in the 3rd trimester is a chemical abortion. In this method, a chemical is inserted and a baby is literally burned alive. Burned alive. The third of those 3 most common methods of aborting a baby in the 3rd trimester is to insert a needle through the torso into the heart of an infant to kill that baby. That is how we perform abortions in the 3rd trimester. This amendment does not say that women who have been raped or have been involved with incest or their health is in danger, those women could still be allowed to receive an abortion. Because we understand that there needs to be protections for women as well. But there has to be a point at which some humanity kicks in for us. There has to be a point at which we can all look around and say, this is particularly disturbing. And I would just make a point that, if you did these things to a baby just a week later, a day later, if that baby was outside of the womb and you did these things, again, a day later, not only would you be charged with murder, but that would be aggravated. A judge would consider those aggravating circumstances for how heinous that kind of crime would be. We are offering what we believe are very reasonable amendments to this bill. We are not neutering this bill like some like what was done to Representative Keel's amendment. We're not doing that to this underlying bill. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to delete your language. We're just saying that there should be some reasonable guardrails around what we're doing here. And certainly saying that an abortion needs to be performed in the first trimester or the second trimester is a reasonable guardrail. At some point, we need to be willing to consider a little humanity and what might be happening in that little body in the womb in the third trimester with those really gruesome methods of abortion. And I would ask for a roll call vote on this amendment, Madam Speaker.
Representative Neu Brindley requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Jordan moves to amend the Neu Brindley amendment to House File Number 1. The amendment is coded A25.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm glad to see that we all think it should not be a crime for Minnesotans to make choices about their health care, which is what my amendment does. I trust Minnesotans to make those choices.
Discussion on the Jordan amendment to the amendment.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Representative Doubt, state your point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to a point of order under Mason's Manual, Section 401 and Section 398. I can read them to you, actually. Mason's Manual, Section 401, Part 4. An amendment identical to one previously decided on the same bill is not in order. And Section 398, Part 2, when a proposed amendment has been defeated on the same amendment may not be proposed again without first reconsidering the vote by which the amendment lost. It is clear that in this chamber we don't do the same motion multiple times. This actual amendment would turn the Neu Brindley amendment into an amendment that was already decided in this chamber. That amendment was the Keel amendment that was then amended by a Katiza-Watun amendment to the amendment. So that was the A19, and then once the A24 was added, if this amendment were to be added to this bill, it would be the exact same amendment. And it's not just that that amended amendment would be out of order. This vote right here is out of order because this is actually the same vote that we just took. This is a vote to say we want to turn it into the exact same language as the previous question that we just considered here in this body. So we have a long history of not doing this in this chamber. I understand that these amendments are designed to kind of soften these underlying amendments so that more members can vote for them from your side of the aisle. I appreciate that. However, this particular effort on this amendment is clearly out of order according to not only Mason's Manual, but according to our precedents here in the House and the way we've conducted ourselves in the past. So, Madam Speaker, I would ask that you find my point of order well taken and rule this amendment to the amendment out of order.
Representative Dowd, I would call your attention to line 1.3 in the Hollins amendment and 1.3 in the Jordan amendment. They are different. Representative Doubt. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask that you find the point of order not well taken because they are not identical if you look at the lines 1.3 and 1.3, as you stated. Thank you.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Point of parliamentary inquiry. What part of those two lines is different?
On line 1.3 on the Hollins Amendment, there's a reference to Minnesota Statute Section 145.417. And on the Jordan Amendment, there's a reference to Minnesota Statutes 145.418.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. We can put the same language in every section of statute in the entire statute book. We can put it in every one, and it's still the same amendment. It still has the same impact, it has exactly the same language, and it does exactly the same thing. We can put it everywhere in the book. And we all know that it's exactly the same amendment. There isn't a thing on these two amendments that's different. You know, suggesting that we're going to insert it into a different section of statute, they do exactly the same thing. And therefore, it is exactly the same amendment. Doesn't matter. We could insert it. We could vote. I could offer this amendment 75 times tonight in 75 different sections of statute, and I guarantee you before I got to the third one, you would rule every one of the subsequent ones out of order. Because I'm violating this section of Mason's manual. So, Madam Speaker, I think we all know that putting the same language, the exact same language, into different sections of statute doesn't make it a different amendment. This is exactly the same amendment, the exact same language, and therefore it is a violation of those two sections of Mason's, 398 and 401. And I'd ask you to find my point of order well taken. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Advice on the point of order. The member from Stearns, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask that you would rule the A25 out of order. We know that the concern of setting this precedent in this chamber is of great concern. If you rule that a change to the statutory citation is enough to make an amendment no longer identical, this chamber is going to grind to a halt. Under such ruling and precedent, members would be allowed to offer any number of otherwise identical amendments, simply changing the statutory citation on each one. We know that the right thing to do would be to rule the A25 out of order, and I would ask that you would take that point of order well taken.
Madam Speaker, advice?
Representative Nash, state your advice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would remind you specifically that I think it was a year and a half ago that Representative Frazier had a duplicative amendment to one of my amendments, and it was the exact same language. Yes, the references to chapters of law were different, but it was the same language, and you ruled, Madam Speaker, that it was out of order under Mason's 4014. So not only do we have a poorly drafted amendment, but we have precedents that you have yourself ruled on in the past, saying that Representative Frazier's amendment to my amendment twice was out of order. I would hope that you would find the doubt point of order well taken, that you would rule this amendment out of order based on your own behavior in years past.
Representative Long, advice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to note that we are not changing the underlying statutes with our amendment. These were the underlying statutes that were in the proposed amendments that we have been amending. So those were in the underlying amendments. All that our amendments are doing is changing the language in them. So we are not making an additional, to Representative Doubt's point, we're not changing the section in our amendment to try to get around any rule. The rule says that they cannot be identical, and they are not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
speak again. Okay. Well, if you do, remind her of her own behavior, just like I did. She's done this before, ruled it out of order.
Members, I have been remiss in not introducing a former member who's in the chamber, former State Representative Ilhan Omar, now Congresswoman for the 5th Congressional District, is in the chamber. If we could give her a warm welcome. Having listened to the advice of Representative Neu Brindley, Representative Nash, Representative Demuth, Representative Doubt, Representative Long, I find that the point of order is well taken. The amendment to the amendment is out of order. We are on the underlying Neu
Madam
Brindley
Speaker?
amendment. Representative Neu Brindley.
I would move to overturn the ruling of the Speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Madam Speaker. I was so prepared, Madam Speaker. I was so ready.
I thought my people were going to do that.
I was
but-
so ready.
Discussion to the Neu Brindley amendment. Any discussion on the Neu Brindley amendment? There is a roll call on the Neu Brindley amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza-Watun, to the Neu Brindley amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I would ask you to vote no.
Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would certainly ask you to vote yes, but as you are thinking about this vote, I really hope you think about the things that we talked about. I know that we just got a little off track talking about rules, which is not very interesting. But now that we're actually taking a vote on this amendment, I hope you think about these things. And don't think about what I said. Don't think, I mean, frankly, what I say here is not important. What is important is that we're actually thinking about that life, about that person, about that human being who we know in the 3rd trimester can feel excruciating pain. And I will remind you that that pain is inflicted in horrific ways in this 3rd trimester. Dismemberment, being burned alive, having a needle inserted into the heart to kill that infant. I would also remind you that this amendment still allows exceptions. It still allows exceptions for rape, incest, the health of the mother. This is the most reasonable guardrail we could possibly place on House File 1, and I hope you will vote yes.
Madam Speaker, I request a call of the House.
Representative Demuth requests a call of the House. Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. Members, because during COVID we did not have call of the House, I'm going to explain what a call of the House is. On the call of the House, we will open the board for members to press their button to indicate that they are present in the chamber. And members cannot come and go without catching the eye of the speaker to get permission to leave. So the clerk will take the roll on the call of the House. The clerk will close the roll. We are on the Neu Brindley amendment. Further discussion to the Neu Brindley amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take, Representative Neu Brindley would like to close. Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. Again, we've had, I know, lots of interruptions and distractions during the debate on the A22 amendment. So I just want to remind folks of where we are on this. Right now, with the underlying bill language, we are looking at the most extreme abortion policy, certainly in the United States, but in the world, along with just 7 other countries. The underlying language allows for any abortion, for any reason, via any method, up until the day of birth. And in fact, I'm not even sure that that's real clearly defined. So what we've been trying to do with these amendments is just add some guardrails around this. 70% of Minnesotans believe that we should have some guardrails around abortion. 70% of Minnesotans think that there should be guardrails. And I think that particularly when it comes to the A22 amendment, this is one of those things that is particularly horrific. This amendment to the underlying language would say that there's guardrails around 3rd trimester abortions, and that those abortions could only be performed in cases of incest, rape, and the health of the mother. It's the only time they could be performed. However, we still allow for that with this language. And the reason we're putting this forward is that we know that in that 3rd trimester, and it's defined in this amendment as 26 weeks. And so we know that by 26 weeks, those babies can feel excruciating pain. And again, I would just ask you to think about those 3 most common methods of aborting a baby in that 3rd trimester. Dismemberment, literally going in and pulling pieces of an infant until that baby is removed. And again, that baby has to be put back together to make sure that all of those pieces have been removed. It is gruesome. And I cannot imagine the pain that that baby feels. Another method is literally being burned alive in the womb, a chemical abortion. And the third is taking a needle and inserting that needle through the torso into a beating heart to kill that baby. I'm grateful for the opportunity that we have to vote on this amendment. I'm hoping that what this shows us is that there's some humanity here today. And that while, even as this amendment shows, we want to protect women in this state, and certainly as other amendments we've offered have shown, we want to protect women. We also want to protect babies. And beyond 26 weeks, when they are feeling pain, surely we can say that in only the most extraordinary circumstances should that happen. And I would ask for a yes vote.
The clerk will take the roll on the Neu Brindley amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1.
Third reading, House File Number 1. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Long moves that the call of the House be lifted. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The call of the House is lifted. Discussion to the bill. The member from Olmsted? Members, we're on third reading to discussion of the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn. Hold on just a minute. Discussion to the bill. The member from Red Wing, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you.
Goodhue. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand here today in this body wondering how this became the Minnesota DFL Party's #1 priority, as this was marked House File #1. When I ran for office this year and talked to many people in my district, there was so many concerns with inflation, high gas prices, and so many others that people had. There was a smear campaign against the Republicans. We were outspent something like 1-7. We were called extreme. We were called radical. We were falsely said to the women of Minnesota that we were going to take away their rights. We were told that we did not care about women's health care. I stand here today and I ask Minnesotans, who are the extreme ones? I ask Minnesotans today, how can the majority party get this so wrong? I ask the Minnesotans today, when you voted DFL, did you believe the lies? I ask Minnesotans today, who cares about women's health care? I ask Minnesotans today, did you want to be the most radical, extreme state on abortion laws? I ask Minnesotans today, was this what you voted for? Was this your #1 priority? There was a PBS poll done in 2019 that even said pro-choice voters disagree with third trimester abortions. My DFL friends might want to listen to this. Pro pro-choice voters. A PBS poll, 2019, 72% disagree with third trimester abortions. 72%. This is not democracy to push this bill through today. We did not hear from the people of Minnesota. This body is not respecting the voters of Minnesota, not even the pro-choice voters. And I ask Minnesotans, as we stand here today on this vote, knowing that abortion was already legal in the state of Minnesota, knowing that abortion was a part protected in the Constitution, Minnesota, your voices were not heard by the majority party. Your voices were not heard. We do not want the title of the most extreme state on abortion laws in the state of Minnesota. I ask for the DFL party to be reasonable and to add guardrails for the health and the safety of the mother. I ask the DFL majority to listen to the voters of Minnesota. And if you do not, you are going to wake up a giant here in Minnesota. People that are not going to accept this, because this is not healthcare. We see through your hypocrisy. We see through the lies. This is not what Minnesota wants.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today is a sad day in Minnesota. You know, each day I come to the Capitol with enthusiasm about facing new challenges and finding solutions for the people of Minnesota. Today, I arrived with feelings of dread and apprehension, knowing what the majority would vote for today, what the debate would likely be. You know, we hear a lot of talk about extremism. In the last campaign, I think virtually every Republican was branded as an extremist. Now, what is an extremist? Webster says it's being excessive or radical. Does that really describe folks over here? When you think of being excessive or radical, do you think of Paul Anderson, John Petersburg? We value life. We do recognize that abortion is here, but is it really extremist to believe, as many Republicans do, that rape, incest, or the life of a mother should be important considerations? Minnesotans value life. I know of a woman who rescues eagles. If she gets a call in the middle of the night, she will drive out wherever it's from and try to find that eagle, carry it to her car, and take it to a raptor center down in the cities and try to be there in the morning so she can deliver that injured eagle and save its life. A friend of mine found a cat alongside the road that had been hit by a car. She took it home. She nursed it back to life. And for years, she cared for that cat, even aiding its bodily functions. People chain themselves to trees to try to save the tree, to preserve its life. But you're willing to kill babies, possibly seconds before birth. That is extreme. So, if we are branded as extreme because we value the lives of the unborn, so be it. To paraphrase Barry Goldwater, extremism in the defense of the unborn is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of protecting the voiceless is no virtue. Let me conclude with the words of Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the first time that I have ever picked up this mic in this room, and I'm incredibly proud that it is going to be to speak in support of this bill, House File 1. This is an extremely important bill, and yes, one that we ran on and that we won on. We know the people of Minnesota want the ability to make their own personal and medical decisions. We've heard a lot about the medical side of abortion, an extremely safe medical procedure. In committee and in various committees, I should say, we have heard testimony from the following organizations: Minnesota Medical Association, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Minnesota, Fairview Health Services, Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians, Minnesota Chapter of American College of Physicians, Minnesota Chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and on and on and on that paragraph goes. It is a safe procedure. We've heard the word extreme said over and over and over and over again with amendments and now speaking to this third reading. What is actually extreme is that anyone in this room, myself included, should have any say in when Minnesotans choose to start a family, when they make difficult, hard decisions with their families, tragic decisions. That is the extreme position, not our position, not what this bill is trying to say. And I am proud and extremely excited that when we, whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's Saturday, we press this button and the majority of us press the green button, it will be the last time anyone on this floor will be able to make decisions for Minnesotans about abortion access. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we're one Minnesota at the end of the day. It doesn't feel like one Minnesota today to me. It's not a proud moment for me. It's not a proud moment for the people I know in District 3B. We are now on House File 1, allowing for abortion, any reason, anytime, till birth. I would say that's extreme. With privilege of a trifecta comes great responsibility. This day will be remembered long past me. Section 1, Subdivision 3 states reproductive freedom. Every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about the individual's own reproductive health. Let me remind everybody that reproductive health includes many things: abstinence, birth control, adoption, and abortion. I am pro-life. I say that understanding the emotions surrounding this topic of abortion. We're talking about abortion under reproductive rights, one piece. For women who become pregnant, there are two medical terms that have unfortunately become very political terms, which I found on the campaign trail frustrated women at every door I knocked. I was asked, can you explain to me why my miscarriage, stillborn, ectopic pregnancy is called a spontaneous abortion? 10% of women have had a miscarriage. That's the ones we know. That's under 20 weeks. Stillborn over 20 weeks happen. Ectopic pregnancies and many other medical complications. Why does my medical chart call it a spontaneous abortion? Then we have the induced abortions, the ones we call some countries call it elective, we call it induced. The ones that we're making that decision. We, as women, have had DNCs, DNEs. They're all under, we have medications that are used, whether we have a spontaneous abortion or a induced abortion. It has confused all of Minnesota to the point where we are not even reasonable at the final time of a trifecta to make a vote for all Minnesotans. It's extremely disappointing to me. Like I said, my constituents who are pro-choice have reached out to me. They've communicated loud and clear. We do not support third-term abortions. They simply wanted Roe versus Wade, and they got something that's far more extreme. Let me remind Minnesotans that we're joining a few countries who allow abortions past viability and all the way to 40 weeks. Who are we joining? North Korea and China. I'm not excited about today. The minority party presented reasonable amendments to allow no third-term abortions, except for the life of a mother, rape, incest. We've heard it all. It was voted at committees I sat on, 100% no. We now have 0 guardrails. Minnesotans are reasonable. I know that in my heart. I'll leave here today knowing I did my best. I would never, nor would any member of this GOP, deny a woman in Minnesota a spontaneous abortion for the life of the mother, miscarriage, stillborn ectopic, and we've even went beyond, saying let's be reasonable. Let's have first, second trimester. And it's a hard no. So induced abortions till 40 weeks is not Minnesota values. And the 2021 report from MDH talks about 18 girls that were 15 years and under had induced abortions. 163 minors, 16 to 17, also had induced abortions. Minors who could be victims of abuse, sex trafficking with no reporting. I don't know who has their voice. I don't care if it's thousands, one is too many. These are young girls. Minnesota's 5th in the country for sex trafficking, and yet we're gonna have girls potentially at risk. I say this to you as a person who had a high-risk pregnancy. I was on bed rest for months. I then, because I had symptoms that looked like Down syndrome, I had excessive amniotic fluid, and I ended up seeing a neonatologist weekly. I was told the eyes were too far apart. The bones don't measure right. We can't see the fingers, and the list went on and on. I was advised to get an amniocentesis, and although I've been a nursing home administrator my whole life, I said no. The baby's gonna be at more risk for me to go into labor, and I would have no chance of saving this baby. I had no intention of not raising a Downs baby or a baby that wasn't Downs. I was keeping the child. I had a genetic counselor come in and speak to me as a pregnant woman. Like I would hope they would speak to all people for 24 hours, have some advisement. To tell me at 30 years old, do I know that if I choose to keep this and I continue and I don't, find out if I have this Downs baby, that, you know what, I might not be married because statistics show my husband might leave me. I might not have the time to spend with my other child because I'm gonna have a different child. I left that room and I just prayed. And I left that room and I knew I was having a baby. I fully expected to have a Down syndrome baby. Guess what? The doctors were wrong. The specialists, they're humans too. They are not always 100% right. I learned that in breast cancer. I had 3 opinions there, all different from doctors. No one more important than the other. I made my decision. I kept this baby. And I can tell you, yes, his bones were big. He follows his Slovenian grandpa. He has very big bones. If you met Bob Zalesnikar, you would know what I'm talking about. I have 2 children that sit at the table. I'm glad that they do. And I hope members review what we're really talking about. I'm a reasonable person. I think Minnesota's reasonable, and we're far beyond it. We cannot join and be proud to join. Not France and some of these countries that have parameters for 12 weeks or up to what we used to have with Roe versus Wade, something that was viability. We're going with North Korea, China. Did you all hear what I said? China and North Korea. I'm not hanging my hat on that. I hope you vote no.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was married for 4 years when I had my first ectopic pregnancy. I grew up in the church. I'm a good Baptist. And I went to the doctor with symptoms, and they said, "We think you have an ectopic." And the church taught me that if I prayed hard enough, and if I trusted, that baby would be okay, and that the doctors can be wrong, and that humans are fallible. And so I sat in that room with that emergency room doctor, and I said, "Are you 100% sure?" And that physician explained to me that he was pretty sure, but he couldn't be 100% sure unless he did more blood work in 24 hours. But given the symptoms that I was having in that 24 hours, that tube could rupture, and I could die. I didn't have any other children yet. I had been married. I had a house. I was finishing up a master's degree. And I looked at my husband and I said, "What do we do?" And he said, "It's your choice." And the doctor said, "There's a pill that you can take that will save your tube and it will potentially save your life." And I said, "But you said you're not 100% sure. You're not sure." And he said, "I can't be sure for 24 hours, and you might be dead in 24 hours. And so I left that emergency room with my husband crushed, and I did not take that pill. And I went and I talked to people who I trusted, people who I had grown in faith with, people who I believed had my best interests at heart. And they talked to me about how that choice would affect my eternal soul. So I didn't take the pill. And the next morning I went in for the blood work, and the doctor called me just a little bit later and told me that I needed to get to the emergency room right now. And I went, and I don't remember a lot because it ruptured, because I had emergency surgery, because they took my tube, because I was in a room where I was making choices based on other people's definitions, where I didn't feel empowered because of my own choice to trust the physicians that I was with. And I don't think as a politician, it's my job to be in that room ever.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a very difficult day for all of us, and I appreciate the discussion we've had. You know, I'm old enough to remember when many friends of mine who are Democrats wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. That was the mantra back in the 80s and 90s. This bill demonstrates that Democrats have moved far beyond that to the extreme abortion policy in Minnesota of abortion on demand, up until the time a baby is born. Of the 193 countries in the world, only 59 allow abortion on demand. And of those 59, only 7 allow abortion after 20 weeks. This is less than what Representative Neu Brindley's amendment would have done, which would have been 26 weeks. So by us allowing abortion on demand up to the point of birth, as has already been said, we join only 7 countries. And we already had a very reasonable amendment that would have allowed abortion even in the 3rd trimester with exceptions for rape, life of the mother, health of the mother, and incest. Members, what we are doing by not taking the Neu Brindley amendment is very extreme, and also can put people at risk. And I'll get to that in a minute. But in addition, I want to point out that in other parts of Minnesota law, if there's an unborn baby killed in utero, it is considered a crime, except in the case of abortion. We saw that recently with the very tragic murder of Kyla O'Neill, who was killed in Lakeville, and her in utero 9-month baby was safely delivered, but sadly, his name was Messiah. He later died. And so now that person who killed her is going to have the 2 murder charges against him. That baby, if could have been saved, he would have had a full life. He was able to be viable. So in other sections of Minnesota law, since the statutes, it says that killing an unborn child at any stage of prenatal development is murder. Could be first, second, or third degree, or manslaughter. It's also a felony to cause the death of an unborn child during the commission of a felony or through the operation of a motor vehicle. So members, we as a state believe that there is value in unborn children in the womb, and we consider it murder in many other sections of statute. But yet today, we are going to the extreme position of saying that abortion is legal in Minnesota up to the point of delivery. I don't think most Minnesotans support that. In my conversations throughout the last many months, that has not been the position of my pro-choice constituents. They still would support legal, rare, and safe, but not this extreme. And that's what I've heard from my constituents. But members, in addition to not supporting the Neu Brindley amendment, you also voted against a very reasonable amendment from Representative Scott, which would have allowed us to regulate abortion facilities. And we also, as was pointed out, regulate nail salons, regulate many other places where people deal with things that affect our bodies and our health. And I just want to say that this really was an important safeguard that would have helped protect women. And I'm very disappointed that that did not pass. And let me just give you a few statistics. In 2021, there were 10,136 abortions in Minnesota. In that same year, there were 118 situations reported with intraoperative complications that included cervical laceration, requiring sutures or repair, heavy bleeding or hemorrhaging, and other complications. In addition, there were post-op complications, 87 of those that included cervical lacerations requiring suture or repair, heavy bleeding and hemorrhaging, infection, failure to terminate the pregnancy so the pregnancy continued to be viable, incomplete termination of the pregnancy where retained products of conception required re-evacuation. Members, you rejected an amendment that would have required regulation on abortion facilities. These are very serious complications, and without regulating abortion facilities or requiring that late-term abortions be provided for in a hospital facility, you are putting women at risk. So members, I'm so sad about this. I'm very sad that Minnesota is joining the most extreme countries in the nation in allowing birth up to the point of delivery when we had opportunities to do it differently that were rejected. Members, I'm at a loss, but I hope people will have a change of heart and vote this down. Thank you.
The member from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, members. 12 days into our new session, and we're dealing with House File 1. I have never imagined something moving at such a rapid speed with such complexities and life consequences to it. Today, I really am not speaking to the bill because it's complex, and I have not a lot of rights to spend a lot of time on this bill as a man. But the words spoken today matter. And I want to really talk to the 5 members on the DFL side who run the place, because this really is going to matter to you. And I want to talk about what it's like to split off from your party. And I want to talk about what it's like to make a decision, an independent decision that you want to make, but you're told you can't do that today. And I want to give you a pathway to do this, because I've done it. And I want to say, I think I'm fairly respected in the body as a person who can work both ways in a very nonpartisan way, a very bipartisan way that is very effective. I think I have made an impact in the 8 years that I've been here, and I want to give those 5 members over there a piece of advice. Because you did not knock on doors to come down here to not just codify Roe v. Wade. Your members, the 65, want you to go all in. And for the new members, you can't take this vote back. And as independent voters, you will do the right thing, I pray, to do the right thing to say to your leaders, I can't do that today because we can still work on this. You know why? Because we're only 12 days in. We have a lot of time to do what you said your voters to do, and that was going to be to codify Roe v. Wade. You don't have to do more than that. This is a very important vote for you, and you cannot take this back. But when you get in your car and you drive back to your district tonight or tomorrow, whenever we're done with this, who's not with you is the author of this bill to go back to your district. Who's not with you is the Speaker of the House. You go back alone, and you face the music alone. It's how you voted today. But if you said, you know what, I'm gonna vote red today because we can actually do this better. It's too extreme for you. It's too extreme for your district. Like for me, when I had to vote against my team, my teammates, I wasn't supportive of that when I was in the majority. I wanted to push opioids. I wanted to push a bill with my other colleagues. I fought like crazy on my side. I didn't get it through, but I fought, and I did what I thought was the right thing. I fought for hands-free driving back in the day, when we should do better with this. My team wasn't ready, but I fought it. Didn't get it through, but I fought it. And I wasn't afraid to stand up. Driver's license for all. Let's have that conversation, because I know we're gonna. I've been fighting that one alongside of our undocumented workers, but it's got to be done the right way. I've been there. So when you stand up and when you start voting for your district and not always your team, you will have more respect in this place. So to the 5 members sitting over there and your guts are rolling and you've got a button to look at, it's red or green, I will tell you this. You will never regret this if you took a pause, because this session's not over. This bill will come back again, and it'll come back better, and you can support it because it won't be so ungodly extreme. So please think about that part of the bill and about every vote you take, because there's 1 or 2 members over there that have shown a glimmer of hope. And to those members, thank you. But I also know there's those other 4 other members, 5 other members, won't call you out. You know who you are, but it's going to be tough. But be a leader, be independent, because you know in your heart this is not the right bill on this subject. So members, please vote red. We need a few more red votes to pause it. We can go back to this. This is not the end. But think about your district, because you're going to go home alone.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't planning on speaking today. I actually wrote this as an op-ed, but I decided that it made more sense to do here. I hope that my colleagues across the aisle can understand and respect how much courage it takes to stand up here and talk about this really difficult issue, and that you can still see me as a human being. We've heard a lot tonight that mischaracterizes women and birthing people, and I think it's important for us to recognize that we're all just human beings, and we're all doing the best we can. I've never known how to talk about my abortion. Maybe because it was unremarkable in almost every way. My birth control failed, and I found out that I was pregnant just a few weeks later. I talked about it with my partner, and I decided I wasn't ready to have a baby. So I went to a clinic, was provided medication, and had a very heavy period in the privacy and security of my own home. It wasn't an easy decision for me to make, but it was my decision, it was my body, and it was my future. Still, I wasn't raped. It wasn't a miscarriage gone wrong, and my life was never in danger. But what justifies a good reason to have an abortion? I've never known how to talk about my abortion because the world we live in makes us decide which stories are more valid than others. We are so inundated with the most heartbreaking and horrific stories that we often forget about the routine, necessary healthcare procedures that are performed every single day. Almost 1 in 3 women of childbearing age has had or will have an abortion. And that means statistically, you know and love someone who has terminated a pregnancy. That also means that many of the abortions that are performed in Minnesota are routine, minimally invasive healthcare procedures. Despite the large body of work that shows that a person's freedom to control their own body is fundamental to their success and happiness, individuals who seek abortion are subjected to demonization and shamed into hiding their stories. Undergoing any form of medical procedure can be intimidating and scary. And the last thing society should be doing is perpetuating a shaming culture by discrediting women based on their association with abortion. Abortion-related stigma is not extensively researched yet, but one meta-study shows that the majority of studies that show that women who have had abortions experience fear of social judgment, self-judgment, and the need for secrecy, and that secrecy is associated with increased psychological distress and social isolation. For many years, my partner was the only person who knew about my abortion. I hid my experience from the world, and I was scared of being judged, worried that my circumstances weren't extreme enough to justify my abortion, and most of all, afraid that I would be alone in my experience. 2 years ago, my mother revealed to me that she had also had an abortion. She found out that she was pregnant again just months after having me, and she wasn't ready for another baby. As she hesitantly told her story for the first time in 37 years, I realized that we are all trapped in a prison of our own design. We've allowed stigma and control to isolate us. We all feel alone even when we're together. And worst of all, this stigma keeps us from being there for our loved ones who are going through the exact same journey. So I've decided that the silence stops with me. I'm taking a stand to end the generational trauma and oppression associated with my bodily autonomy. I refuse to keep my abortion a secret for 30+ years. My daughter deserves to know that I will be there for her if she needs to make the same difficult decision in her future. All of our children and loved ones deserve the right to make their own decisions on their reproductive health care needs. Our kids should have the same rights that their grandparents did when Roe v. Wade was passed on January 22nd, 1973. We cannot go backwards in history. My abortion is worth talking about, and so is my mother's. It doesn't matter the nature or reason a person seeks to terminate a pregnancy. What does matter is that a person has autonomy over their body and has equitable access to safe termination procedures. The passage of this bill and the resounding support of Minnesotans in favor of this legislation is another important step in destigmatizing abortion. In Minnesota, we must establish that maternity is not a destiny, it's a choice. Our children and all generations going forward need to know that the decision of how and when to have a baby is one that is precious, fundamental, and uniquely their own. I wouldn't be here today speaking if my 9-year-old daughter hadn't told me that she was proud of me and of the work we're doing today, and hadn't encouraged me to do this. Thank you.
The member from Stearns, the member from Wright, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And before I move on with my comments, I wanted to just say something to Representative Hollins. I don't see you any different. And I don't think anybody here sees you any different. Because I, for one, have a huge heart of compassion. And I think anyone that's worked with me knows that. What I care about are people, this institution. I will defend anybody at any time. I don't see you any different. I appreciate the fact that you shared your story. And I wasn't going to say this, but today is actually an anniversary for me. My own baby, 18-month-old, died today in 2000. So I have an incredible heart of compassion for mothers that lost children. And today is a day that's very difficult to talk about that. But I think it's something worth saying, and I think it's worth honoring. And Representative Hollins, you're not alone. I'm not sure if you were in Minnesota at that time, but I have a number in front of me because I always have numbers. Anybody that knows me, I have numbers, but there were 296 children that died here in the state of Minnesota since Roe v. Wade. 679,000. And that's just to the statistics from 21. And listen, I have a heart of compassion for each and every woman that made that decision. I really do. I don't know how many people in this room actually held their own infant child. Mine was 18 months old, so I had some time with her, but held them as they died. It changes you. It forever changes you. What is difficult about today is that anniversary and the fact that we are taking a vote. This is not a court decision. This is not the 1995 Doe v. Gomez court decision. This is a button in front of us. This is a yes or no vote in front of us today. That we are making that decision today to decide that we are going to say it's okay to do an abortion up until the very moment of birth for any reason, any method, right here in Minnesota. This is a heavy, sad day. It's one thing to have the Minnesota Supreme Court make that decision in December of 1995. But for us to push our buttons and codify this into law, to say, we're going to allow abortions right up until the moment of birth, for any reason, any method you want. And there have been some horrendous methods been described. I will not repeat them because I honestly do not have the strength. But that is what we're doing here today. This is not the court making a decision. This is us. This is the people of Minnesota, because that's who we represent, deciding for the other people of Minnesota, for our constituents, that we're going to allow abortion for any reason, for any method, up until the very moment of birth. There is no place in the entire United States that has that. No place. I really don't want to be on par with communist countries. They take it a step further and they force abortions on women, which of course nobody in this room would possibly agree with. That's horrendous and horrific. And yet, we are going to allow abortion again, any reason, any method, up until the moment of birth. So please think about that as you have the power to say yes or to say no. This is not a court decision. This is our decision. And we represent the state and the people of Minnesota.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pretty hesitant to rise, as you can imagine, being somebody who cannot become pregnant. But I was encouraged to speak based on my background, in particular as a prosecutor of gender violence. I should note before that, just to remind folks that HF 1 simply codifies the existing regime for abortion in our state. It does not change the law, except that it is a statement by us that issues of reproductive health care are not our business. It puts us in the same position as the Supreme Court case and makes sure that there is statutory protection in the same way. It does not make any changes. We've heard a lot of talk about extremism and descriptions of various issues and really challenging situations. Of course, we've heard really powerful stories, for which I'm so grateful to members both sides of the aisle for sharing those. I had missed some language in the amendment that was voted down just before we got to third reading relating to abortion in the really challenging situations later in pregnancy. And for me, it really jumped out as being really powerful as an indication of what's going on here. It points out that under that amendment, there would have been an exception, would have not been a restriction on abortion, if documentation was presented to the attending healthcare provider that the conduct was reported to law enforcement within the first 15 weeks of pregnancy when there is a sexual assault or rape. It's pretty easy to talk about, there's an exception for rape, exception for sexual assault. Think about that situation. You're going to walk up to your healthcare provider and you're going to say, here's my police report. Oh, wait, we need to date that police report. It's 15 weeks. Wait, when was that child conceived? Are we at 15 weeks in a day? Who is in the room with that person? This is a really challenging situation we're talking about. Somebody having been pregnant for a number of months, facing really difficult situations very often, a very tiny percentage of pregnancies, but very often a really difficult situation, some of which we've heard references to. At that moment, presumably the person wants their doctor in the room to talk to. The person may want family members there, may want religious, their spiritual advisor, their pastor, their imam, their rabbi. They may well be praying. One person I know they don't want in that room is their state representative. Nobody voted for me in my district saying, hey, I want you in that exam room with me. Not a single person did that. I don't think they did that for any of you either. And members, the reason that that language jumped out at me in particular is because of the regime of control. Ultimately, are we talking about controlling, having the government control what somebody does with their body? We've heard powerful personal stories from people, such tough stories and such tough experiences. Those are experiences people have in their personal lives, not in their political lives. None of the business of the rest of us. That is not our business. So members, as somebody who's experienced prosecuting, as I say, gender violence, in particular the trafficking, exploitation of young people and of people, there's a reference about sex trafficking victims. Members, the way that crime works is controlling other people. If somebody is impregnated if someone who's being prostituted has been impregnated by somebody else, these exceptions don't apply. Are we going to measure exactly what happens in the statutes and the crimes? Members, it is not our business. It is the business of our constituents, their medical advisors, their spiritual advisors, their family. That is their business. Members, I am proud to support this. As somebody who finds this a challenging situation, I think you all do. And that's why it's each person's business to decide what they do with it. And the HF1 simply codifies that. Members, I urge you to vote green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franzen. Members of the gallery may not disrupt the proceedings of the House of Representatives. I'd like to remind our guests to please refrain from disturbing the House proceedings. It is a violation of Minnesota state law. Sir, if you do not cease, you will be removed from the chamber. Members, you will be removed. Members of the audience, you will be removed if you disrupt the proceedings of the Minnesota House of Representatives. The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. February 13th, 2020, the article from the Minnesota House of Representatives website for news. Minnesota House DFL unveils the Great Start for All Minnesotans Act. In it, there's a quote: "If we're serious about closing our state's achievement gap, we must start by passing legislation that invests in our youngest Minnesotans long before they set foot in a kindergarten classroom," said Representative Carly Katiza with Toon. Now she's done the complete 180 with House File 1. House File 1, the most extreme abortion bill in the state of
Representative
Minnesota.
Agbaje, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise to a point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Point of order, Mason's Section 124, personality is not permitted in debate.
Members, I would remind the body that the issue before the House is the bill, House File 1, and that it is improper to discuss members' personality and motives in the discussion. The discussion should be confined to the bill. Representative Franson.
Okay, well, there's no personalities that I was talking about. So anyway, complete 180, House File 1, most extreme abortion bill in the state of Minnesota, which does not give children a great start in Minnesota because it ends the life before they are born. The first day of the committee for the Children's and Family Committee, which I think was on January 5th, it was the Great Start for Minnesotans Children presentation. And this comes from a pediatrician that was offering some testimony about how the brain is built and why experiences matter. And the quote from the pediatrician: "Now the other thing to think about is there's a critical time in order to these connections. In utero, lots is happening." He's speaking in utero, in the womb. Lots is happening with that unborn baby. Developmentally, the brain is developing, and my NICU colleagues will talk very, very much about the importance of the in utero environment. You need to support mothers, you need to support babies, and so it begins there. Speaking of supporting babies in utero, House File 1 does not support babies. Then there was a quote from a DFL member on that committee. "I want to highlight the advocacy that you showed today and how much music is important in our emotional and social and cognitive development. I got really engaged into learning more about the frequency of the brain for early childhood development back in 2012, when the BCI, which is the Brain and Creativity Institute out of the USC, did a study where they showcased the frequency of brain waves from the child who was listening to music while they were inside their mother's womb." Talking about brain waves. This is a human being in the womb of that woman. And I practiced this when I was in a high-risk pregnancy. Thankfully, to have my daughter with no complications at birth. And neither I, and also recognizing that growth, that with my daughter's involvement in youth, that I work as a musician to feel that eliminating programs with arts and music is like robbing a child's development. So this individual, this DFL member, would have her unborn baby listen to music in the womb, something that many pregnant women do. I did that with my own children. And then when my children were born, they listened to the little baby Einstein CDs with the classical music. This is really just a very tough day. This bill is just horrendous. The representative that was before me, Representative Mary Ellen O'Tremba, so pro-life. In fact, when I was thinking of running for office, I had a conversation with her in the retiring room because we knew it was time for Representative Mary Ellen O'Tremba to retire. And her most important request was that no matter who replaced her, she wanted them to be pro-life. That was her most important request. That was back in 2010, in that retiring room right there. And I told her, if you retire and I run, I promise that I will carry your legacy of being pro-life for Todd and Douglas County. I know some of you are struggling to vote yes on this bill because you really want to vote no. And I'm asking you to think about that child, the child who has potential, a child who would love to have that great start here in Minnesota. This bill is about abortion on demand. It's the most extreme bill possible. A third trimester abortion, can you even believe it? Coming from the Mayo Clinic, at week 28, which is the start of the third trimester, the baby's eyes are partially open. At week 29, the baby kicks and stretches. At week 30, the baby hair is growing. Week 31, the baby's rapid weight begins. Now, I know a little bit about something about rapid weight gain. My second child, I wanted to go to a concert so bad, and it was Bryan Adams playing with Def Leppard. And I was sitting at the physician's office, and I said, I really want to go. And the due date was just close to the concert that I wanted to go to. And I was talking about inducing my labor so that I could enjoy this concert because I really love Bryan Adams, and who doesn't want to see Def Leppard, okay? And so we have this conversation, and the doctor's like, well, the baby is, I don't know what he said, it was like in the 5 pounds or so at that time maybe. And my firstborn daughter, she was 8 pounds, 5 ounces. And that was a long, long, long extreme labor for me. It was a lot of hours and a lot of Demerol. So anyway, the doctor said, all right, well, we're going to keep an eye on this, and we'll probably induce you at around, I think he said 7.5 pounds, okay? So we did. Got me a little induction 2 weeks early. Now, the doctor said this baby was going to be about 7 pounds. Carl Daniel Franson was 8 pounds, 9 ounces. 8 pounds, 9 ounces. So yes, a little bit about growing a little rapid weight gain. That baby is just taking all the nourishment and growing strong. At week 32, that baby is practicing breathing. Week 33, the baby detects light. Week 34, the baby's fingernails are growing. Week 35, that baby's skin is smooth. Week 36, baby takes up almost all of the amniotic sac. Week 37, that baby's head might be turning down. Week 38, the toenails are growing. Week 39, the baby's chest is prominent, and week 40 is the due date. So, this comes from the Mayo Clinic. Definitely not a fake organization. But I want you to think about those things as you vote on this bill today. You are voting for the most extreme abortion bill that Minnesota has ever seen. It goes far beyond Roe v. Wade. It is infanticide. And I ask you to allow those babies to have a great start in Minnesota. And that great start starts in the womb. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, today I've received dozens of emails and responded to people that were concerned about the extreme bill before us. And, frankly, I want you to understand why some of us see that way. We are formed by the experiences and events and activities in our lives. And these people, they're wondering why, you had the opportunity to use language from Roe and put it in statute, but you didn't. You had the opportunity to ensure that we weren't more extreme than almost every nation in the world, but you didn't. And so they see the bill before us and wonder why. Personally, my youngest child had two friends. They were twins. They were born extremely premature. If they'd been born 5 years earlier, they would not have survived. But I got to watch those two children grow up, and they're adults now. And so I developed appreciation for the stage at which the unborn are viable. But what really sunk home was my daughter-in-law, more than 2 months before her due date, was hospitalized. And shortly after, my youngest grandson was born. We weren't able to go in and see him for a while, but we got a picture of my son with my grandson. His little fingers were wrapped around my son's little finger. And then we got to see him, and he was bigger, but he could fit in the palm of my hand. And every time I hear the discussion of late term or, some of the abortion things that go on, that's what comes to my mind. So that's how you can understand where I come from. And every one of the amendments would include health of the mother, rape, incest, but they wanted to try and be more normal. Even with the amendments, we would still be more extreme than most of the European countries, most of the nations of the world. But we just, from our life experience, it hurts us to think about a viable human being that is aborted. And that's where we're coming from. And I listen to your stories and your experiences, and I understand the desire for access. But without health and safety guidelines, I think we're coming up short. So I know we're not going to all agree, but I just wanted you to know why I feel the way I do. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My life is better because I've had the ability to make my own healthcare choices. And I only stand here because for most of my life, I have been able to do so. Like Representative Hollins, I didn't intend to speak today, but my mom asked me to. She, like many people, doesn't want politicians making healthcare choices. And she also, for most of her life, has had the ability to make those healthcare choices herself. We've heard a lot of stories, but for the most part, we haven't talked about the real Minnesotans who have made decisions about their healthcare without our interference. And so I want to make sure that we do hear those stories today. So I'm going to share a few stories from Minnesotans across the state. Like Megan. She said, in 2018, I needed an abortion to save my life. I had an ectopic pregnancy, which are non-viable and life-threatening for the mother. In the time between diagnosis and surgery, I was instructed not to be alone in case my fallopian tube ruptured and I began to bleed out. Abortion access is so important because in that short time, I do not need to make a plea to the state or the courts or anyone in this room in order to get permission for this health care. I was able to make a decision with my doctor, and I got the immediate care I needed. Here's one from Susan. She says that she is nearly 80 years young. Her high school classmate died from an abortion before they were legal in 1962. We were in Girl Scouts together. In my life, I suffered a full-term stillbirth of a daughter in 1965. Another classmate required a medical abortion to save her own life. We cannot go back to sacrificing these lives. Never go back. Here's just another abortion story from Paula, who's a physician. I have assisted about 100 women through pregnancy and delivery and navigated the complex risks of pregnancy and the consideration of abortion with my parents. I've held the hand of someone going through an abortion and mourned with women who had spontaneous abortions. I have a disorder myself that would have made future pregnancies in life-threatening. Abortion is difficult on many levels, and it is always a complex decision that a woman needs to make for herself and her family, hopefully with the support of loved ones and educated caregivers. It should never be a decision made by a politician. Physicians should never feel they have to break the law to do what is right for the health of a patient. And Paul is not the only doctor or physician that has weighed in on this. You have a letter here from the Minnesota Medical Association. On behalf of the more than 10,000 physicians in training, the members of the Minnesota Medical Association, I am writing strongly to support House File 1, the Protect Reproductive Options Act. Healthcare decisions are deeply personal and must be made by the patient based on what is best for that patient with the input and advice of their healthcare professional. This is especially true for reproductive health. The PRO Act represents and respects patient autonomy and ensures that patients have access to all medically appropriate options. That's what doctors in this state want. I also want to share another story from Jerry. He says, in 1972, my girlfriend flew from Cedar Rapids, Iowa to New York City to get an abortion. In 1975, my girlfriend became my wife. In 1979, my wife started a new job at a technical college and found out she was pregnant and had a second abortion. In 1982, our daughter was born, and in 1984, our son was born. In 2012, 2014, and 2016, grandchildren were born. In 2017, my wife passed away from colon cancer. Thanks to safe access to abortion care, we were able to plan our futures and lives together. Members, I'm really glad that Jerry and his wife were able to plan their lives together. They had that ability. Fortunately, for so many other people, they haven't had that ability. This is not the decision of anyone in this body to make decisions about my health care. It's mine, and it's decisions I make when I talk to my doctor. And the only politician in this room who should make decisions about my health is me. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker and members, earlier in the day I was asked to sign this so it could be delivered to each of your desks, and it's a letter from the Minnesota Catholic Conference, and it's signed by Archbishop Hebda and a number of bishops after that. And for a lot of us, faith is exceptionally important. And I know that some of you have expressed to me, and I'm not going to name names, but you have said that it's grinding on you, that members of your faith have spoken to you, and that they have encouraged you to follow your conscience. And they put in their letter, it's on the back, that the work to limit demand for abortions does not, however, absolve the legislator from the responsibility to protect living human in the womb, and that no support for public assistance programs is sufficient to exonerate one from complicity and cooperation in creating legal frameworks that facilitate the death of other human beings through abortion. That's a lot. And I know that because, again, the members have spoken to me, and follow your faith. Follow that friction that's inside of you, because I know that you recognize that this is an extremely extreme bill and that there are no guardrails. It enables abortion up to the moment before delivery. That's not Roe. Representative Niska pointed that out and was very clear and was very right. It's not Roe. I'll share a story with you that I talked to a family member of mine. This family member is a Democrat. This family member was 44 years in the healthcare industry. And I described what happens in this bill. And this family member is pro-choice. But when I described what all it does, and this family member calls me Jimmy, and you may not, but said, Jimmy, anything past the first trimester is murder. Their words, not mine. This is a pro-choice Democrat, and yes, you can have a pro-choice family member, a Democrat, and have Jim Nash, super conservative in your family. It works out bumpy at times, but this is a person that I find a lot of grounding in. And I reach out to them, and I was actually kind of surprised to get that answer from them, but they made it very clear, and they were shocked at the extremism of this bill. I know a lot of you have been listening to and hearing from your faith community. I am not Catholic, but I have a great relationship with a lot of the Catholic priests in my district, and some of my very closest friends are Catholic, and this type of letter says a lot to them. And I am grateful to the Catholic Conference for putting this out. I encourage you to read that, and I know the pages delivered it to your desk. I think it was Representative Baker that said to the five, find the courage. I know you can do this. And I will close reminding you, as that dad that held that little one in my hands, I would have done anything to save that boy. And that was at a very early stage of pregnancy. I cannot imagine pushing the button green today that would enable that life to be snuffed out minutes before delivery. That is extreme. I cannot do that. And I encourage those of you who are struggling, don't do it. Vote red. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to remind us why we are all here today. Roe was the law of the land until it wasn't. Abortions are legal here in Minnesota until they are not. This is why passing the PRO Act today is necessary. The Protect Reproductive Options PRO Act protects Minnesotans' reproductive freedom to decide when or if to become a parent. Specifically, the legislation puts into state law the fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about your own reproductive health care, including the right to contraception, the right to continue a pregnancy, and the right to have an abortion. On our watch, let me remind us that we let a GOP Congress refuse to confirm Supreme Court justices during Obama's administration. Then we allowed an extremist president to appoint conservative justices, and we watched while those justices lied about their belief that Roe did not need to be codified because it was the law of the land. In this elections, voters told us that they will not be fooled, which is why reproductive rights was the issue most talked about at the door. I know this because I personally knocked doors in almost everybody here's district. I knocked doors from the North Shore to Moorhead to Mankato and all around the metro. If anyone has ever door knocked with me, you know that I take copious notes in the van. In reviewing the data before the election, Minnesotans overwhelmingly told us abortion access and reproductive rights is the top issue. Yes, when I go home, Representative Carly Katiza-Watun will not be with me, but she will not need to be. The voters empowered me, they empowered us to ensure that people continue to have the ability to make medical decisions for themselves. The outrage I hear from my friends across the aisle today and in the discussions we've had in committee, I hope that they have the same outrage when they think about the fact that today we are still fighting for equal rights for women. We prevent age-appropriate sex education, and we promote inaccurate information on sex and pregnancy. I have heard a great deal about how extreme House File 1 is. You know what is extreme? That we deny women and BIPOC people equal pay for equal work. That we refuse to implement systems where everyone has the right to affordable health care. We reduce...
Representative Kosnick, state your point of order.
Mason, section 101.4. Debate on the bill shall be confined to the bill under consideration and does not extend to criticism of other bills or topics.
Representative Hur, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, and I will actually tie it in because I'm laying the groundwork, which I think our GOP colleagues always do a great job of, and I would just appreciate the same leeway. We won't invest in high quality and affordable education, and we ignore the housing crisis and the important role this plays in raising a family. We stack the odds against anyone wanting to start a family. And then when somebody says they cannot bring a child into this world, we demonize them. That is extreme. I will be proudly voting for House File 1 to ensure that people get to make decisions for themselves, and I ask all of you to do so as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I did not plan on speaking today, like a lot of other folks we heard that from, but I don't want to speak from a stance of grandstanding or bloviating. I just want to tell you guys a story. One of a 15-year-old girl who learned of her pregnancy to a child that was conceived by an abusive boyfriend. A boyfriend who forced that girl into an abortion clinic, threw her $40 and said, "Don't return to the car until it's gone." If it weren't for an elderly woman that was noticing this fidgety, anxious, and very nervous girl, and she's just said, "Hey, we can leave here right now together and we can go raise this child," then I wouldn't be here. That was my mom. And what this bill does, in its very essence, that 15-year-old girl can go in without guardian consent, underage, in an unlicensed abortion facility, and not have to tell their guardian of this procedure. I respect the stories that we've heard from the other side of the aisle. I really, really do. And you're strong for telling them. But that's not reasonable. And our constituents told us that what they wanted reasonable. They told us that they wanted people to stand up for lowering the temperature, for trying to find ways to actually speak to each other again. And this bill isn't reasonable, and that's not working for One Minnesota. I would urge you guys to vote against this bill. Thank you.
The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, members. This has been a long evening and challenging for one of our first debates on the floor. These are typically later in the session when we've had a little experience. And This is a heavy subject, no matter how you slice it. I was thinking about abortion and listening to everybody talk. I'm old. I was a teenager when abortion was allowed. I was in high school when 73 happened. So long before that, there were abortions, there were ectopic pregnancies. I actually have a great aunt they found dead at the mailbox because they didn't know this, but she had an ectopic pregnancy. They didn't do that then. It was in the early 30s. And she died because she bled to death while her 2-year-old was with her, and her husband found her later. And it was very tragic. That young lady grew up without a mom, and she just passed away, had Alzheimer's. But those tragedies happen. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't deal with ectopic pregnancies or that they've never been taken care of. I have friends who have had those done even after. Doctors have always been able to take care of those. The advice that someone had mentioned was wrong. You cannot have an ectopic pregnancy and survive. It is just a fact of life. It isn't possible to move a embedded baby in your fallopian tube. But long ago, there were a lot of things that we did that we didn't know about. I happened to be one of those children who came along at the wrong planned time for my parents. My very beloved grandmother, I found out just recently, suggested to my mother that she go have an abortion because, and not safe, it would not have been safe. But I wasn't coming at the right time of life. It wasn't planned right. Planned. We have taught our children that babies are planned. We plan our family. We can decide when they come and how they come. Well, I got news for you. I got 4 kids, 5 pregnancies. Not many of them were planned. I'm not going to go into the discussion of it. But the point is, children don't necessarily come when I say, oh, I decided we're going to have a baby in December, and so I'll get pregnant 9 months earlier, 10 months actually. That's not how most people work. We have a lot of families. I have a nephew right now really struggling because they would like to have children and they're having trouble. It doesn't always show up that way. I believe Representative, because I with 2 and I have a hard time with the other one, you didn't expect to have children, so you adopted some children, 3 of them, 3 wonderful children, and then God said, guess what? We're going to let you have another one. I believe, you may not, I believe that every child is a gift from God, a creation, whether they are complete or they come with troubles, some health thing. Many of us get sick at an older age and realize, oh, we were born with something. We had no idea. But it really bothers me that we are teaching our children that we can just plan. We can decide when to have a baby. We can get rid of a baby that's inconvenient. We can get rid of a boy that we wanted a girl. We can get rid of a girl because we wanted a boy. We didn't want to have a baby on that month, so we'll have an abortion. And those things are happening. Now, when someone is raped, there is other problems. Certainly, our medical profession has a right to help that girl, that woman, in the privacy of the office. Certainly, we want to take care of everyone. We all want that. We want people to be successful. We want them to be healthy. We want them to have happy lives, fulfilled lives. But we're not doing that by taking a life away to adjust things as how it would work. I just fear for my grandchildren that they think that life can be so planned. There are many things that happen that we didn't plan to have or do. I wasn't planning on being here, ever. I had other plans in my life, but here I am. And we adapt. And that's what happens when we have children. We adapt. And I can tell you many times that a child that wasn't being expected was such a super blessing. We don't want to be getting rid of children. We don't know when the next president is going to be born or what happens. If we go back into history, we're going to find all kinds of people that didn't come when they were supposed to, or it didn't go the way they were, or they weren't perfect in our human eyes. They were in God's eyes. He formed them the intent that He wanted. And I want you to think about that. Abortion is still going to be legal in Minnesota. You're just adding to it. And then, of course, allowing abortions to go all the way to birth. Are you serious? Many of those children can live, and another family would be just die to have a child, to have a baby to hold, to care for, raise, and blossom as an adult. It is really important that we think about what we are doing here. We are not getting rid of abortion. We are not removing a lot of opportunity. You can have an abortion if you have problems. You've always been able to have an abortion when you have, an ectopic pregnancy. I hear that comment made when there's the life of the mother, there's a problem, the baby is not viable. Certainly, those things are taken care of. They have always been there. Yeah, we can find people that something happened. But many, many times, the doctor takes care of the mother, and the doctor decide, along with often their spouses, about what needs to happen. And that's what's so important. But I will tell you, members are talking about the election, and we referred to that. But I will tell you, as much as it was not the forethought of my constituents when I was elected to this seat again, I was elected because I'm pro-life. My district is heavily pro-life. Many would like to see us still allow abortion in the first trimester, and I understand that. But many wanted none of this. And I think you are going to regret the conversation when people understand what it is we're really doing here. And what I'm terribly fearful of is this is just the beginning. We are just going to keep talking about how to control life, whether it's at the beginning of life or the end of life. There is value in everyone that is put on this earth. There is importance in everyone. And I think we have to start remembering that life was chose by somebody much higher power than us. I would like you to really think about who decides that you are sitting in the seat you're in, that you are providing for your families. Your families are growing, and you need to understand that God is in control of this. And I would hope that you'd understand that we need to preserve life. Madam Speaker, thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Katiza-Watun yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There was some discussion earlier on abortion facilities themselves, and I'm wondering if Representative Katiza-Watun can give us some idea of what kinds of inspections take place at abortion facilities.
Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Right now, abortion facilities are not required to be licensed.
Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there was maybe some confusing misinformation earlier in talking about the licensure bill. There were some things conflated, but I will just say we were told that there's lots of other places that aren't licensed. However, other places are inspected, and we brought up dental facilities particularly, and I will just say that they are inspected by OSHA. They are inspected by HIPAA. They are inspected by infection control. They are inspected by the Department of Health. They are inspected by the Department of Labor. And they are inspected by the Minnesota Board of Dentistry. So I just want to be clear that we were told that they're the same. They're not the same. Abortion facilities do not have any required inspections, certainly not from the Department of Health, and certainly not on procedures that are far more invasive than a dental procedure. Madam Speaker, would Representative Katiza-Watun yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In subdivision 3, your language reads that every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions. And I just want to clarify, does that language include a 13-year-old girl who still needs her parents' help and guidance in life? Can she walk into an abortion facility and receive reproductive health care on her own?
Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Neu Brindley. As stated on line 1.14, every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous health care decisions about their reproductive health.
Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Katiza-Watun continue to yield?
She will. Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Katiza-Watun, does this mean that that 13-year-old girl can walk into an abortion facility on her own and make the decision to have surgery for an abortion?
Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Neu Brindley, over 95% of youth in Minnesota do consult with a trusted adult before they move forward with any sort of reproductive health care decisions. But this bill would protect every Minnesotan.
Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative Katiza-Watun continue to yield?
She will. Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have very different ideas of what it means to protect. But that 13-year-old girl, according to the languages in this bill, does that also mean that that 13-year-old girl can walk in to a facility to seek reproductive health and at 13 years old choose to be sterilized for life?
Representative Katiza-Watun.
Madam Speaker and Representative Neu Brindley, I think that's an excellent question. I don't know that any 13-year-old would necessarily make that decision. But this bill does protect the rights of every Minnesotan to make their own reproductive health care decisions.
Representative Neu Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative Katiza-Watun, for your honesty. Because, obviously in this debate, we've been very focused on abortion. And, there are really critical pieces to this language that I don't think are well thought through. I don't think we've considered the different things that can happen under this language. And certainly, under this language, a little girl, a 13-year-old girl, any age really, can walk into a clinic and demand to be sterilized for life. 13 years old. There are no requirements in this language for counseling to discuss such things. And in fact, I would say, if you're using a strict interpretation of this language, you can't do that. You can't coerce. You can't tell them that they can't do that. In fact, this language probably precludes that. This language probably precludes counseling for that 10-year-old girl to understand the permanent decisions she is making. Well, I used 10 that time, which is also applicable under this language. We have very, very different ideas of what it means to protect. This bill is, I know you don't want to hear it, it is the most extreme abortion language in the country, certainly, up there with California, which actually gives you a little time after the birth of a baby. But in the world, 7 countries, that's it. And we had an opportunity to hear tonight just to put some incredibly reasonable guardrails around that. Licensing clinics, making sure that we are at least licensing, inspecting these facilities so we know what's going on. We can ensure, just like a dental office, that infection control protocols are being monitored, that the space is clean and safe for women receiving these procedures. To put guardrails and just say, you know, the feds got it right on this one. Partial birth abortion is both horrific and unnecessary. We don't need it. We don't need it. And of course, the discussion we had on allowing abortion in the 3rd trimester only for those most difficult and extreme cases, at a time when we know that baby in utero can feel extraordinary pain. But while this body tonight rejected those amendments, Minnesotans do not reject those guardrails. Minnesotans believe that we should have reasonable guardrails around abortion. 70% of Minnesotans believe that we need guardrails around abortion. In fact, 50% of Democrats think that we should have guardrails around abortion. 50% of your own party. And here you are voting for the most extreme language in the entire country. Not only are we giving 0 protections for the unborn, 0, but we're not even affording protections for the women having these abortions. I cannot imagine more extreme policy than, well, I can imagine it because you proposed that too. But what we are voting on tonight is outrageous. It's outrageous. But let's go back for a minute to these minors, children, young girls. This bill absolutely allows for a young girl not only to have an abortion, but to go in and choose to be sterilized. Imagine, you've got a 13-year-old girl who's experienced some pretty horrific things. And instead of saying to that little girl, hey, we can help you. You don't deserve this. Instead of helping her heal, we will give her her abortion without anyone knowing, to be able to offer that help. We'll sterilize her so she doesn't ever have to think about it again. But this bill really, you know, we use the word protect the rights. But this bill doesn't address the safety of those little girls. This bill does not protect those little girls. Do you know that the average age for a young girl to be sex trafficked in this country is 14 years old? That is the average age of a young girl to be sex trafficked. 14 years old. You want to talk about autonomy? You want to talk about these 14-year-old girls, these young girls not having autonomy? Under the language of this bill, you better believe, and in fact, it's happening now, and if you don't think it's happening now, you are delusional. right now. And this bill only strengthens their ability to do it. We have sex traffickers, we have pimps taking those young girls to receive their abortions and cover up their own crimes. If you don't think it's happening, you're delusional. This bill is extreme. This is out of touch. There are zero guardrails, none. We've heard a lot of stories tonight, a lot of difficult stories on both sides. But when you vote on this language, you're not voting on circumstances that would have affected a single one of those stories. Not a single one of those experiences would have been affected by the amendments we offered tonight. Not one. Please remember, when you are voting on this bill tonight, you are voting for partial birth abortion. You are voting for a baby to be partially delivered and killed partially out of the womb. They try to turn that baby breech so she comes out legs first so they can keep the head inside when they kill the baby. That's what happens in a partial birth abortion. That's what you're voting for tonight when you vote for this bill. When you vote for this bill tonight, you are voting for women, girls, to have an abortion in the 3rd trimester. You are voting for dismemberment, for chemical burning of an infant alive, and to stop a beating heart with that needle. When you vote for this bill tonight, you are voting for young girls to have an abortion without anyone knowing. Without anyone knowing. When you vote for this bill tonight, you are voting for the most extreme abortion policy in the world. And I hope you take that vote seriously.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
I heard members, Madam Speaker and members, I heard members earlier refer to the caring nature of Minnesotans. And in my experience, Minnesotans are very caring people. They really do care about others. We see this all the time, and some members gave examples of this. Another thing about Minnesotans is that they are reasonable people. Minnesotans also know that other Minnesotans are not irrational or evil as they are being portrayed here today. We have heard a lot of scare tactics today, a lot of inflammatory language, a lot of things that frankly are not real things. This is not how abortion care works. It is not. So when you hear this is what you're voting for, this is hogwash. This is not what this bill is about. These inflammatory portrayals are just not real. Now, it's important to say, and I don't think I've really heard it on this floor today, that abortions late in pregnancy are extremely rare. 2/3 of abortions occur within 8 weeks, 90% within 12 weeks, and only 1% occur after 21 weeks. And why is that? Why is that? You know, Minnesotans are being portrayed today as though they're frivolous, as though they don't care about what's going on, as though a person who has a fetus growing inside them just doesn't care. And that could not be further from the truth. Minnesotans know that other Minnesotans are thoughtful. Other Minnesotans care. Other Minnesotans have values. And that is the point here today. The point is that we need to trust Minnesotans when they have, especially in the very rare situation where someone feels the need to have an abortion late in pregnancy. That's because there's a very tragic and difficult situation that that person and family need to deal with. And when they're in that situation, they do not need any of us standing over their shoulder between them and their doctor, between them and their own advisors, their own family, their own religious advisors, if that's who they choose. They don't need us in the room to tell them whether their reason is a worthy reason. They don't need to be judged by us. And that is why we don't need to spell out in law what Minnesotans can and cannot do with their own bodies in their own most intimate decisions. Now, one thing I really want to address that has not been mentioned here today, I don't think, is the role of the doctor. Some of the rhetoric I'm hearing today makes it sound like doctors don't have ethics. Doctors are, the medical community in Minnesota is a good community. Doctors are ethical, they're thoughtful. So when we hear members say that a 13-year-old girl could walk in and get sterilized, what about the doctor? I don't think there's a doctor in Minnesota who'd go, oh yeah, you're asking? Sure. No, that's not what's gonna happen. So, you know, it's not as though this is just anything goes. I mean, some of the rhetoric here about how Minnesotans are going to behave is just absolutely false, because in fact, as was said earlier, I think Representative Pinto mentioned it, and Representative Katiza-Watun has been talking about it, what this does is it kind of codifies current law. So if these parades of horribles are not happening now, they're certainly not going to happen after we pass this law and guarantee Minnesotans their privacy. People simply do not do these things for frivolous reasons. And when they have to make these very, very intimate, difficult decisions, they deserve to do it without artificial barriers, without walking in and having to show their paperwork that they proved that it was a rape or some other thing that violates their privacy. These are tough decisions. No one is doing it for frivolous reasons, and the medical community is not doing it for frivolous reasons. And the Minnesota Medical Association, the organization of doctors in this state, this is not an extreme organization. These are your doctors. These are the doctors you go to, you trust them to give you advice. And yet when it comes to this, when it comes to the most intimate decisions Minnesotans have to make, then you want to say they're extreme. Because the way you portray them is just like they have no ethics. And that is just not the case. So the members here who are going to vote for this bill, we're voting for this bill because we trust Minnesotans. We know Minnesotans care. We know they wrestle with this decision. We all have feelings about abortion. Everybody has feelings. And Minnesotans deserve to have their own feelings be the ones that count. Their own values be the ones that count. And doctors too. We need to trust Minnesotans, and we need to trust the doctors in this state to do the right thing, and they do. Thank you.
The member from Stearns, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, as we have just heard that some of the things that have been said with the amendments that we have brought forward and the discussion that has been heard so far, that maybe we were lying. We are not lying at all. What we are doing is taking the bill that is at hand. We are bringing that forward. As you heard Representative Neu Brindley ask the bill author some specific questions online. 1.14, every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about that individual's own reproductive health. Well, that is in the bill. And what I can tell you is that as we've moved this forward quite quickly, we have not put those protections in for that 11, 12, 13-year-old girl, as we heard about. We've heard from across the aisle that we should be able to trust our medical professionals, which I do, and my family has benefited greatly from great medical care. But when it would be put into law that medical professional potentially could have to sterilize an 11, 12, or 13-year-old girl because we haven't put the protection in the bill, we have fast-tracked this, and there could be some definite regret. We have heard how extreme the majority is on this issue. The standard for abortions used to be that they would be safe, legal, or even rare. But instead, we've heard today that it seems that the only concern is about abortion being legal in all circumstances. And under this bill that we are going to vote on, it certainly is not safe. In fact, today the majority has gone out of their way to ensure that there are no health and safety guardrails. Instead, this bill makes sure that a woman could have an abortion anytime in her pregnancy, even when it poses serious health risks for the mother. And it doesn't even require those facilities, the abortion facilities, to be licensed. And late-term abortions, where there could be serious medical risks to the mother, are not required to be performed in a hospital where there would be appropriate medical care that could be provided if there's any complications. In contrast today, you heard the offer of reasonable, common sense amendments that would protect women and children, but yet they were rejected. So if abortion is a medical procedure, as we've heard it defined, why would you not want to support requiring abortion facilities to be licensed and inspected? Requiring the abortion facilities to be licensed and regulated by the Department of Health is reasonable. It's a reasonable provision that would help ensure that the facilities are as safe as possible for women. And I want to thank Representative Walgamont, Representative Liz Lagarde, and Representative Pulowski for joining us to vote against third trimester abortions. Thank you. But unfortunately, a vote on this bill doesn't provide any protection for third trimester abortions. They are high-risk procedures. We know that there is also viability outside the womb for that unborn child. So why would you not support banning this dangerous procedure, with the exceptions, of course, as we've talked about, in cases for rape, incest, or the health of the mother? We know the vast majority of Americans believe that there should be some guardrails, some restrictions in place for late-term abortions. And even worse yet, dilation and extraction, sometimes referred to as partial birth abortion, a term that is not well accepted, but it's what it is. It's a gruesome procedure. We've heard about it today. It's even difficult to talk about. And there's already federal laws that prohibit this. So why wouldn't we support broadly in banning it here in Minnesota? I believe this bill has gone too far. This is no longer about codifying the rights of abortion anymore. This actually puts the health and safety of women and children at risk. You know, when I think about it, you have to be 16 to be able to drive. 15 if you're on a farm permit. At age 18, you are finally able to go in by yourself and receive a tattoo, piercings, you can vote, you can open your own bank account, you can buy a lottery ticket. Age 21, you can legally drink and smoke. But what we're saying in this bill is it doesn't matter your age, just go in and get it taken care of. This bill would make legal the most extreme abortion laws. The bill legalizes abortions at any time throughout a pregnancy, without any safeguards or guardrails. We offered reasonable, common sense amendments, but they were rejected. Members, I would encourage a red vote, a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
In overturning settled precedent establishing bodily autonomy that Americans had relied on for 50 years, Justice Alito said, "We do not pretend to know how our political system or society will respond to today's decision overturning Roe and Casey." Perhaps the Supreme Court has no interest in public opinion, but the public certainly has made clear its firm opposition to the Dobbs decision. Following the ruling, the public outcry against it has been loud, sustained, and definitive. Minnesotans organized, they activated, they mobilized. Thousands of Minnesotans marched to the Capitol, along with many here, to demand action and protection of their fundamental bodily autonomy, their liberty, their freedoms. Nearly 70% of Minnesotans responded in a poll just a few months ago that they support legal abortion. The poll included breaking down the state by region, and it included big majorities in support of legal abortion in every part of the state. I would bet that if the poll had legislative district polling, it would show that majorities in every legislative district in the state support abortion rights. In some communities, it may be the silent majority, while other voices may be louder. But time and again, in red states and blue states alike, when the question has been put to the public, they have made clear they support reproductive rights. They oppose forced birth. In Kentucky, a state that voted for Trump by a 26-point margin, an anti-abortion constitutional amendment went down to defeat. In Montana, a Trump plus 16 state, voters also defeated an anti-abortion amendment that would have criminalized healthcare providers. In Kansas, a Trump plus 15 state, voters rejected an amendment to make abortion illegal by an 18% margin. And state constitutional amendments protecting abortion rights passed in Vermont, in California, and in Michigan. In Minnesota, we have the Doe v. Gomez decision and have had that for almost 30 years. Minnesotans have relied on this protection to seek the medical care they need. But now we know that precedent is no protection, that ideology can drive court decision-making, that a change in court membership is all that's required to see our rights taken away. The bill today ensures that cannot happen. We are ensuring current rights are protected, existing rights. I talked a lot to Minnesotans over the past year from all walks of life, black, brown, and white, rural and urban, demanding over and over that reproductive rights be protected. But the ones that stuck out to me most were the dads. I can't even count the number of dads who told me that they wanted to protect the right to an abortion so that their daughters could make their own decisions about their health care. And that hit home with me because I have a young daughter too. And my whole life, I have taken reproductive rights for granted. I thought that for sure 50 years of precedent would protect us. But now I know my daughter needs all the protection I can give her so that she can make her own medical choices about her own body. Justice Alito and the U.S. Supreme Court want to make reproductive rights a state decision. Well, this state has spoken loud and clear that it values reproductive rights. States across the country, whenever the voters got to decide and not the politicians, have said they want reproductive rights. I want to thank the members who spoke today, those who told their personal stories, those who spoke on behalf of their daughters, those who spoke on behalf of their moms. Today, Minnesota will take the important step of saying that no court should be able to take away fundamental liberties and no politician should come between a patient and their doctor.
The member from Hennepin, the author of the bill, Representative Katiza Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And first off, I do want to express my gratitude to those of you who shared your personal stories of loss. And I'm sorry that you have those stories to share, but I appreciate you bringing your experience to this chamber today. In creating a fundamental right for each Minnesotan, it's clear that we have some fundamental differences. We were told it's radical for Minnesotans to make decisions about their own bodies. We were asked which party actually cares about women's health care. And I think it will be pretty clear who trusts women and individuals when we look at the vote board shortly. But most often, we were told that by passing this bill, Minnesota will be one of the few nation states that allows an individual to make their own health care decisions. But members and Minnesotans who are watching at home, this bill does not change the current landscape of reproductive rights in Minnesota. Everything that our Republican colleagues tried to ban today can already happen legally in Minnesota. Abortion is safe, legal, and rare. It rarely happens. But this bill goes beyond protecting access to abortion. It protects our rights to contraception, sterilization, preconception care, maternity care, family planning and fertility services, and counseling regarding reproductive health care. There was a question about that earlier. A no vote today tells Minnesotans that you don't trust them to make their own decisions. Members, in 2021, over 63,000 babies were born in Minnesota, but we can count on less than one hand the number of third trimester abortions that happened to Minnesotans over the course of that year. One hand, less than one hand. As I recall, none of my Republican colleagues supported the Great Start for All Minnesota Children Act that would have supported over 63,000 children and their families in Minnesota. Yet they are willing to take away your rights to make your personal and private health care decisions when abortion is safe, legal, and rare. Consider, members, sitting down with a constituent who is sharing the story of their abortion the way that one of our colleagues tonight shared hers. Imagine your compassionate response. And now, imagine telling that constituent that you voted to take away their right to make that decision themselves. Make no mistake, while we have already seen an increase in patients coming to Minnesota because of bans in other states, this bill will not open any floodgates of Minnesotans seeking abortions at any point in pregnancy, because in Minnesota, they already have the constitutional right to do so, protected by Doe v. Gomez. Minnesotans saw what happened to Roe when anti-choice politicians appointed judges who tossed almost 50 years of legal precedent out the window after telling us that it was settled case law. Minnesotans are paying attention. Minnesotans want and deserve bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom for themselves and for their neighbors. And Minnesotans heard our colleagues across the aisle tonight call that freedom outrageous. Please join me in doing the work that the people sent us here to do and enshrine reproductive freedom into law for every person in Minnesota. Vote green.
Madam Speaker, I request a call of the House.
Representative Demuth requests a call of the House. Are there 10 hands? Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. All members being present, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 65 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Long moves that the call of the House be lifted. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails. The call is lifted. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. on Monday, January 23rd, 2023.
Representative Long moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn until 3:30 p.m. Monday, January 23rd, 2023. Representative Demuth.
GOP members, we will meet in our caucus room just following session.
All those in favor of the Long motion on the time to reconvene, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Any announcements? Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Long moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Monday, January 23rd, 2023.